Different location for this week's video. I'm in Leon in northern Spain for the eclipse, which is coming up in 2 days from now. Today's Monday, and just in over 48 hours there'll be totality. And that's the big event of the week, but I wanted to skip forward and talk about the next eclipse, which is a deep partial lunar eclipse, which is coming up at the end of August. So let's jump in. Let me show you how to find the eclipse first of all. You come up here to the date controls. I'm on the map page in TPE Web. Click here. There we go. And in August, there's the events for August 26. And you can see on Friday the 28th, in this location, at least at early hours of the morning, is the time of greatest eclipse. So if I select that, you'll see it loads, and it's loading a lunar eclipse map. So let's quickly review what the map means. Down here, just underneath my little picture there, you can toggle that lunar eclipse map on and off. That option only appears when an eclipse is occurring on that particular day. How do you read the map? Well, essentially, you look at the different colors. The easiest one, I think, to understand is the striped area. Those areas will see none of this eclipse whatsoever. So that's eastern parts of Russia, Asia, and Australia, Papua New Guinea, Japan, etc. They do not see this eclipse. And then we have a range of sort of somewhat subtly colored areas in yellow. And the yellow is associated with partial eclipse. If it was a total eclipse of the moon, you would see some red areas and orange areas that would reflect that. But because this is only a partial, we only have a subset of those full colors that you may have seen earlier in this year, for example, in March, in the last total eclipse. So the darker the color, the more of the eclipse you can see from that location. That's broadly how it works. So in this location, somewhere in, is that Nova Scotia, I'm thinking? Let's have a look at the timeline. And we can see over here that the partial eclipse starts just gone midnight, and the moon is 30 degrees above the horizon, so easily visible. And the penumbral eclipse must have started, let's have a look, the day before. So if I go to the 27th, there we are, the penumbral eclipse starts at 10:55 in the evening. And then it proceeds over the next few hours, and you can see here that the moon is above the horizon for all of that. Let's jump in contrast to a location over here in, let's for example, eastern Turkey, and let's go right out there. And let's look at what the circumstances are for the eclipse in that location. Well, the first thing to note is that the moon sets at 5:27 a.m. and the penumbral eclipse, which is the very start of the event, begins at 4:25. All the other phases of the eclipse are shown in the timeline, but if you click on one of them, for example, the start of the partial eclipse, it's not visible. It's at 5:34 a.m. and the moon set 7 minutes earlier. So that band only sees penumbral eclipse. This band here in Turkey will see, there's the moon set. It sees the start of the partial phase, but it doesn't get to greatest eclipse or to the end of the partial phase. And so it goes. So the different colors will give you a clue as to where in the world you can see how much of the total partial lunar eclipse that will occur. Now I've moved my thumbnail up to the top center of the screen here because I want to make sure you can see the little moon simulator down here at the bottom right. I'm going to come back to, let me pick that up, there we go, back to roughly where we started. This is just a random location that sees all of the eclipse. And if I go to the point of greatest eclipse, you can see the simulator is giving you a hint as to what that will look like. So it's a full moon, almost totally eclipsed, but not quite. You see that bright area there. Now there are two ways you can view a full simulation of the moon. One is to expand the mini simulator with that button there, or the other is to click the direct link to the moon simulator here. So let's take a quick look at that. And I'm zoomed way in on this with a few different options on that I don't really need. So let me get that back to a sort of reasonable default state. So there's the moon at this point of greatest eclipse in this location in Canada. If I zoom out, you can see two shadow rings, and the outer shadow ring in yellow is the penumbra of the Earth's shadow, and the red circle is the umbra, so that's the deep shadow cone, and the penumbra is where you're in sort of partial shadow. I could show you that in more geometry. I think it's covered in the last video I did on lunar eclipses. But essentially, a total eclipse requires the moon to be entirely within the red circle. A partial eclipse requires it to be partly within the red circle, and that's what we have here at the point of greatest eclipse. So let me just turn the labels off, and I'm going to show you the start of partial. That's when the moon is just starting to enter this umbral shadow cone. And if I just advance the timeline here, you see as it passes in, and then we reach maximum eclipse, and then it's starting to move out again. So you can simulate the circumstances of this eclipse for your location using this simulator, and you can check a few key values about the magnitude of the umbral eclipse. So that's essentially how much of this diameter is contained within the red shadow cone versus the penumbral shadow cone, umbral versus penumbral. And if I go to the end of partial and then advance a little bit further, you'll see that now we're showing what's called the penumbral magnitude. So that's the fraction of the diameter that sits within the penumbral shadow cone. So have a little look at these statistics in the moon simulator, just to get a sense of the state of the moon. You can zoom right in on this and see a lot of detail. And as you moving backwards in time, there we go. So you can see which features of the moon as well will be in the true shadow and which are in the penumbral shadow, to explore the geometry. And that varies a lot over the surface of the Earth, depending on where you are, and the moon will be in a different rotational state due to where you're observing from on Earth. So that's how you can explore that. Next, I wanted to show you a few different shot plans that I put together just to illustrate different ways in which you might choose to try to photograph this eclipse. And that's using the new shot plan feature here in TPE. Click that with the right part of my trackpad. What I've done here, I have here I am in the library page. This is now called the library. It was locations, and there we have saved locations, saved shot plans, and saved searches if you wish. I have a list here called PLE 2026, Partial Lunar Eclipse 2026, and in that I have it selected. I have 7 plans here that are what I would like to walk through with you. What I'm going to do, I'm going to click that and open it with View and let it load. So this is just to get your bearings. I'll come back to the map here briefly. We're in London, and you may recall that in London the moon sets before the end of the partial phase. And so you think, well, that might be a shame, I'm missing the end of partial eclipse, but not necessarily, because what it means is that you can have a partially eclipsed moon low on the horizon. So here's an example of just one of the things you might plan if you were in the middle of London. I put the pin here on, is that, I think, Blackfriars Bridge, and we're looking upriver, up the Thames here, and let's just look back at the 3D view, and there is the moon setting like this over time. This is at just before 6 a.m. in the morning. It's in late twilight, so the moon, the sun has not yet risen. The moon is still a couple of degrees above the horizon. It's partially eclipsed, and there's the London Eye. You're looking up the river towards, is that the Savoy over there? I think maybe that's Trafalgar Square, I'm guessing it is, yeah. And you can get the moon setting over the Thames. So that's just one example. I'm on a very slow internet connection, so all the buildings are taking a little while to load, but not to worry. So let's go on to plan number 2. So that's for London. And discard that, and then I'll come here to the library. Let's look at the second example, partial moonset over Malpica de Bergantinos on the northern coast of Spain. So I click that and I open it again with the view, and let's have a look at this one. While that's loading, I'm going to come back to the map just so you can see where this setup is. What I have here is I found a headland, this place called Mugardos, and this is a northern coast of Spain, so near A Coruña, and it's looking essentially across these series of bays to this point at Malpica. So it's more of a telephoto shot than the London shot. Let's have a look at what that gives you. And if I zoom in, you've got this nice headland. I think there's a monastery or a hermitage or something on top of this headland here, and a little island out here, and we have the moon setting into the ocean. One thing to note, this 3D view doesn't show the eclipsed state of the moon, and that's because there's a lot of additional lighting considerations that you do for the moon eclipse simulation. But you can always check where you're at. So this is 7:40 in the morning, and we're getting towards the end of the partial eclipse here, 12 minutes later. So the appearance of the moon is like that. So a little chunk taken out of the side that will essentially not really be visible during twilight conditions. But you'll see the rest of the moon setting over the ocean, as we saw here. That's example number 2. Here's the next example, a penumbral moonset over the west coast of Ireland. I'll open that with the view. I think by now you're getting the idea of how these things come together. This one is looking from near Galway. Should always come to the map first and show you where we are. So there's Galway, west coast of Ireland, and we're looking out over the Aran Isles here, and the moon is setting over Inishmaan, I think it's called. And I'll come back to the 3D view, and this one is a real telephoto shot. And what you'll get is, this one could be quite tricky to make out the moon at this point, because it's in penumbral eclipse, and the sun has risen. So what you have here is at sunrise, we're at 6:46, the sun rose 7 minutes ago. You can see it's illuminating the buildings here on the north tip of the island, and then the moon is setting just 5 minutes later. But it does mean that you get to put, with a longer focal length, a very large moon behind the sunrise on the island itself. So that's west coast of Ireland. Let's look at the next opportunity. What if you're in Manhattan? Let me open that. I'm going to open it, but I will show you again on the map first, just so you see where we are. So we're in a location in Lower Manhattan, and the moon is reasonably high in the sky, 40 degrees to the south, more or less, and we're half an hour after greatest eclipse. So this is only a partial eclipse, but it's still close to the time of maximum partial eclipse. And let me show you the view here. Because the moon is high in the sky, what I'm doing is looking to position it relative to one of the skyscrapers, One World Trade Center, in fact. So let me just zoom out so we can see that a little bit better. There's One World Trade Center. Here's the spire on the top. If I just move that out the way, you can see that's 541 meters tall. This is the top of the building. There's the moon. Of course, at a shorter focal length, the moon will look small, so generally you're looking to do telephoto shots of this sort of composition, and you can see how this evolves during the course of the eclipse. And I'm sure you could fine-tune your shooting location to get a different juxtaposition than I'm showing here, but this is just an idea for what do I do if the moon is way up in the sky. It's good to have something to juxtapose it against to give it some context. This is one example of how you could do that. Next example. This is maybe an interesting one. It occurred to me that, of course, astrophotography doesn't really go hand in hand with a full moon, but maybe it does during a deep partial eclipse. Let me show you this particular example. We're over in Colorado now. I'm in Rocky Mountain National Park. Show you the map. Let me put a topographic map so you can get the idea here. So in Colorado, so you have a view from the north shore of the lake here to Long's Peak, and a little cirque going this way, and some other interesting topography over here. The galactic core is up at 26 degrees, that's the center of the Milky Way. The sun is at minus 26 degrees, so we're in true night after the end of astronomical twilight. And the moon is over here in this direction. So let's have a look at how that appears. And what I'll do, just to save my limited bandwidth, turn the buildings off. Let's let that load. There we are. It did load, it's just the focal length was too long. So here we are at about 19-20 millimeters, and you've got the eclipsed moon over here and the Milky Way over there. There will be limited light on the landscape from the moon, not as much as shown here, because this is assuming the moon is full, not eclipsed. But we can check in the simulator that in fact there's only a sliver of moon left at this point of greatest eclipse. So there's a very small amount of light in the sky that would diminish the appearance of the Milky Way. So this is potentially an opportunity to do some Milky Way photography combined with an eclipsed moon. That would be a fun thing to see. Next example, here we are in San Francisco, and this one's a little trickier, but it was one that I thought might be worth a view. Open that. We are next to the Golden Gate Bridge at Point Cavallo. I haven't checked whether this is accessible at 9:15 at night, but if you're interested in something like this, that's one of the things you should check. Here we are with the moon. Blue on blue is a little hard to see. Let me just do that. Grayscale, even there we are. There's the blue line for the moon at this time. Here's San Francisco, and if we look at the view again, this one you want a little bit more focal length. I'll turn the buildings back on, because that's really what makes this shot worth considering. And there are the buildings loading in, and you can see that here the moon is quite high in the sky. It's 16 degrees, and you've got a little bit of a distance, so probably best framed up a little bit wider, maybe 35 millimeters, something like that. And you can have eclipsed moon. This is the point of greatest eclipse at the very civilized time in the evening of 9:13, and the illuminated city skyline over there in the lower right hand corner of the shot. So that's an example for San Francisco. Over in Hawaii, so we're in Kauai, we're looking out over the ocean. I'll open it, I will discard the changes to that one. There's the state of the moon, and you can see here that it's just rising. So we're at sunset, and the moon is at 0.5 of a degree above the horizon, so sort of half a moon's worth above the ocean, and we're pretty deep into the partial eclipse at this point. So you've got an ocean moonrise essentially of the partially eclipsed moon. So that's a walk through some different shot plans that you might consider for the upcoming lunar eclipse on the 28th of August. So don't forget to think about where the moon is going to be at different phases of the eclipse in your location, and then you can refer to these plans and think through what are the types of shots that may work given the geometry of the moon. How high it is in the sky in particular will govern things, and then you're looking to juxtapose it if you can with something useful. Or in the case here where you have a beautiful moonrise over the ocean, you may not need anything at all other than just what's presented to you. So lots of things to think about there, and I hope you get some great eclipse shots. Thanks for watching. If this was useful, please give it a like, and I'd love it if you'd subscribe to the channel, and check all of this out in the web app at app.photoephemeris.com. See you in the next video.